Hey everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Seed. This week I wanted to share a passage that I recently read. So we're going to be in Mark 9, starting at verse 14. And this is the story of Jesus healing a boy who is possessed by a spirit. So Mark 9:14. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus, "everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out by prayer." One thing that I really love about this passage is uh, what it tells us about the idea of doubt and about belief. So this crowd, right, has a boy who's possessed by a spirit, and they bring him to Jesus. And Jesus' first reply, essentially condemnation, is he calls them an unbelieving generation. Now, at this point, the boy's father, right, approaches Jesus and then essentially says, "If you can, take pity on us and help us." And then Jesus' response is to question that statement. If you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. And I think this really stands out to me because as believers, oftentimes we bring things to God, right? We bring up any issues. Maybe it's not something like possession by a spirit, but we bring these issues, we petition God. And then our prayer is essentially, if you can, maybe if you have time, if you're willing, if it's in your power, can you help us? To which point I just imagine Jesus going, if you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. And here he's reinforcing one of the most beautiful promises of the Bible, this idea that if you ask, you shall receive, that if you present things in belief, then God shall answer according to his will. And so I think this story is just really a reminder that, you know, God promises, right? Everything is in God's power, and he promises to listen to his children, like a good father. And so when we present our petitions, it should never be if you can, but instead we should call on call on God. But that being said, right, the story also recognizes that doubt is a very real part of approaching God and asking things. So that's why I love what the boy's father says afterward, which he says, "I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief." Right? So this is a very paradoxical statement. I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. And here what we see is that this belief, right, isn't just this idea of, "Oh, I trust you completely," but it's also in a way asking God, like recognizing that doubt is a part of the human experience, but then trusting that God can overcome that doubt, right? Um, and so maybe it's not that you trust God completely, right? Because oftentimes we'll doubt, oftentimes we won't believe. But it's continuing to return to God time and time again, because you know that wherever there is doubt, wherever there's that gap in your trust, that's something that God can fill in, and that the Spirit can move in. I guess from this passage, right, the big takeaway I'm coming with is as we look out upon this week, right, the real seed is where are some places where you might be doubting, and what can our prayer be, right? So, firstly, that we pray counting on God's promises, that there is no if you can, but instead there's a complete trust in the promises of the Bible. But then, secondly, in those areas where we do doubt, may God help our unbelief. So those are just some things to think about. Uh, some prayers. I hope this was helpful.